In 1755, Lisbon, Portugal was struck by a massive earthquake and tsunami. Lisbon was the capital of the thriving Portuguese Empire, and in 1755 it was a center for political activity and had a diverse population from many different countries and cultures. Prior to the earthquake, Lisbon had a population of 250,000, one of the largest in Europe at the time. Many members of Lisbon's large population were religiously devout. The Catholic Church was an essential aspect of life for many of Lisbon's people. On November 1st, many of the people were in church celebrating All Saints' Day, a religious holiday observed by the Catholic faith. While the people were in church, 300 kilometers to 400 kilometers southwest of them, tectonic activity was occurring. The Grange Bank, a submerged ridge in the Atlantic Ocean, began to move. The ridge marks a transform boundary between the Eurasian and African plate, and on the morning of November 1st, 1755, a massive earthquake occurred. Between 9:30 and 9:40 in the morning, the people of Lisbon felt everything begin to shake violently. An 8.5 to 9 magnitude earthquake struck the city, crumbling buildings and destroying homes. Buildings fell on people, 5-meter fissures opened in the ground, prayer candles were dislodged, and fires began to spread throughout the city. The surviving people ran into the streets and towards fields in the Tagus River where they could escape the falling buildings and fires. 10 minutes later, the earthquake was over and the city had a considerable amount of damage. Shortly after the earthquake, many survivors were gathered by the river, believing they were safe. Little did they know, their situation was about to become much more perilous. At 10:10, the water began to recede, and then an enormous tsunami struck the Lisbon harbor. At 12 meters high, the waves demolished the city and killed many of the earthquake survivors. After the waves subsided, the fires continued to ravage the city for another 5 days. By the end of the destruction, approximately 60,000 people were dead, and 85% of the infrastructure was destroyed. 1/3 of the population had perished in the span of approximately 120 hours.
In the aftermath of the devastating fire, earthquake, and tsunami, people began to ask themselves why. Why had this happened to their prosperous town? People blamed God. Maybe he was angry at the gambling and premarital sex. Or maybe science was behind it. People began to ask a lot of questions. But sadly, people in the town began to be persecuted. They began to be hung, and even innocent people were treated poorly. It took Portugal a long time to recover from this great difficulty, but sadly, they never regained the culture and strength that they had before the Great Lisbon earthquake.
It is important to note that not only Lisbon was affected in this seismic event. Effects of the quake were felt as far as Finland and Britain. If an event similar in magnitude were to happen today, the Isles of Sicily and parts of Cornwall would be utterly decimated. The Africa plate still rotates counterclockwise to the Eurasia plate at a rate of 4 millimeters a year. Although that is relatively small in comparison to other active plate boundaries, it has still generated recent seismic activity. The Lisbon metropolitan area not only holds the largest population density in Portugal, it also has the highest property value. In recent years, 50% of Lisbon's architecture is reinforced concrete. Reinforced concrete buildings are decent for resisting earthquake damage, yet not as good as steel. There have also been efforts made for educating the population in earthquake and tsunami safety. All things considered, Lisbon is still at a high seismic risk to this day and stands to lose approximately 15 billion euros and numerable lives and damages. With an increase of education, more of the population would accredit a comparable event to natural science unlike their religious forefathers.